Remy fun fact time. Did you know? Rock Band and Ratchet & Clank aren't the only games I play. Wow. Contrary to popular belief, I play games for enjoyment every now and then, rather than solely recording them for the sake of reviews. But you see, I can't monetize simply playing games for recreation on their own, so... Since I made that wholesome games video a while back, I've really wanted to return to that format, but couldn't quite figure out exactly how I wanted to do it. There were ideas for themes I could tackle, which I may very well do one day, but then I thought, you know, all these games I've been playing and occasionally recording for my raw gameplay channel, I could do something with them. And thus, an idea was born. This is Racclog. I play games from my backlog, do a quick little review on them where I spew out my thoughts or just give impressions if I didn't finish the game, and bada bing bada boom, I feel less like I'm wasting time while playing games casually, while also satiating my need to write as well as make videos longer than 15 minutes. Is it unhealthy to turn a significant chunk of my biggest hobby into something that can be monetized and makes me feel like I'm being productive when I'm not? Yes. Okay, yeah, it could be considered kinda unhealthy, but honestly, when it comes to picking games from my backlog, I get so overwhelmed by choice, as well as numerous other factors like, I don't know, actually starting the game. So if I told myself, hey yo girl, it's for a video, that gets me way more motivated. It's also the chance to talk about different types of games that I usually don't get to talk about, and either can't or don't want to try to flesh out a whole 15-minute minimum script with. So yeah, I'm just gonna talk about games I've been playing. Don't expect a whole bunch of editing or deep analysis or anything. The intention with this, apart from appeasing the little gremlin inside of me that just wants to write about everything, is to have something that's easy to make to fill gaps every now and then. So I'm not gonna be flung across the screen or bleed from my ears or whatever. There might be some text on the screen and I'll shut up to let the gameplay speak for itself sometimes, but otherwise this means you can safely stick this on in the background without needing to pay full attention while you go get that dub in Fortnite or whatever. Kinda like a scripted podcast. I mean, apparently some people put my videos on in the background anyway, so hey, random person who sleeps to the sound of my supposedly soothing voice, this one's for you. But yeah, I just want to shoot the shit and gush about some good-ass video games, and maybe some bad ones as well, who knows. But our first game, well, if you call it bad, I will personally smite you. As a direct fuck you to 2017 me who said keyboard and mouse was stupid and unusable, I've now learned how to use it. I'm still absolutely garbage, especially with any game that requires a million bajillion inputs. Doom Eternal makes my brain spin in its juices, but despite this, PC is now my platform of choice when I play most shooters. This has given me the opportunity to play a lot of boomer shooters, first-person shooters from the 90s such as Doom, Quake, Duke Nukem and Blood, and games that are directly inspired by them such as Dusk, Proteus, Ultra Kill and Ion Fury. I haven't played all the ones I want to just yet, but Dusk and Blood have easily been my favourites so far, and AMID Evil is not too far off.
AMID Evil? That doesn't look like a shooter, that looks like Skyrim for art snobs.
Oh no, I guarantee you this is absolutely an FPS. While it plays very similarly to many arena shooters released before it, its setting alone is more than enough to really set it apart and make it worth playing. Where other arena shooters tend to focus on some quip-spewing white guy fending off aliens or ghosts or creatures from hell or whatever, AMID Evil sees you playing as a guy who just loves to laugh. Travelling through different dimensions that resemble something closer to various mythologies and MC Escher paintings, and wielding weapons that wouldn't look out of place in the hands of an evil and fucked up wizard. Bare knuckles? No, how about an axe? Crummy pistol you only use until you get literally any other weapon? Try a staff that shoots projectiles that home in on enemies. A double-barrel shotgun? Who needs that when you have a sword? The machine gun is a trident that fires lightning, the super shotgun fires, I don't know, icicles or something. The BFG summons a black hole and the rocket launcher just straight up shoots planets. That is so fucking metal. Weapons all have their uses too. The Staff of the Azure Orb isn't a particularly powerful weapon, for example, but its homing shots make it a brilliant choice for flying enemies, while the Whisper's Edge is great for circle strafing around enemies that are huddled together. It's a kinda small number of weapons, but AMID Evil really gets a lot of mileage out of them with the Soul Charge meter, which upon activating gives all your weapons a cool alternate fire. Suddenly the sword's projectiles are bouncing off walls, the trident fires chain electricity, the planet firing staff swaps planets out for stars. We just went from metal to prog speed metal. This game's soundtrack is all orchestrated and mystical, but I could easily see this game being backed up by something like Vector's Terminal Redux. Although, speaking of which, Andrew Holshort mans the soundtrack as he does for every arena shooter nowadays, not like I'm complaining. It's not the metal we've come to expect from the guy who did the soundtrack for Dusk and the Ancient Gods expansion for Doom Eternal, and if you heard this, you probably wouldn't even guess it's him. Christ, this soundtrack is good. The sound design in general is really good. Weapons sound great, music is A tier at least, but it's the actual implementation of sound that really helps gameplay. You can very clearly tell when an enemy has been hit or defeated, and the sounds of enemies are all unique so that it's easy to tell exactly what you're up against, switch to the appropriate weapon, and go in all planets blazing. The amount of effort that's been poured into this game is absolutely stunning at times. Each episode has an entirely different theme with a whole new set of enemies that you would think would just be palette swaps, but no, the vast majority behave differently from each other, so each world, each totally gorgeous world might I add, is a completely different experience. And yeah, these worlds look so damn impressive too. The chunky, low-poly enemies look great and are animated super well, reacting differently to whatever weapon you hit them with. Pinning them to walls with the Star of Torment is incredibly cathartic, not gonna lie, but I don't know how they managed to make the game look so utterly stunning when the textures look like this. Seriously, this grass has less pixels than a gosh dang Porygon. While the 6th and 7th episodes, the Arcane Expanse and the Void, were probably the most visually stunning of them all at times, they were, I think, my least favourite episodes to play through, especially the Void. That might just be my fault though. I like being able to run around in large open spaces in these types of games, where I don't have to worry about falling off the map or back down to an area I just charged through and can circle strafe no issue, and these two episodes, especially the Void, have a lot of suspended narrow platforms that make it difficult to move about and dodge enemy fire effectively without slipping off and getting reset back however far. Again, that's probably just on me being shit. The only other thing I could possibly comment on is the way weapons fire. When you hit fire in a medieval, there's a brief but noticeable wind-up animation where the champion readies their weapon before firing it. This, along with slower moving projectiles, means you have to get used to leading your shots more so than any other FPS, and it's absolutely not a bad thing, just something you'll need to get used to. It's probably why I ended up relying on the staff of the Azure Orb more often than most people, because I can't aim to save my life. Anyway, my word probably doesn't count for a lot because I did end up playing this on the easiest difficulty because I'm, as the children say, a huge scrub, but even then I had a blast with a medieval and I'll be returning to it sometime in the future to blast through it again on a higher difficulty, especially with an expansion just around the corner. This is an easy recommend if you love Dusk or are a fan of these kinds of shooters in general.
I'm a bloke, I'm an knocker, and I really love your knockers. I'm a labourer by day, I piss up all me pay.
Okay, so bear with me, this Racclog is going to be 60% first-person shooters, I apologise, but the kind folks over at the Quantum Astrophysicist Guild have been kind enough to send me a couple keys for games in recent months, including a new shooter called KUR. KUR just released in early access a little while ago on the same day of the Realms Deep 2021 presentation, which showcased a lot of FPSs that look like they'd be right up the alley of people aged 35 and over. KUR stands out amongst them for a few reasons. Most notably that I don't think it looks nearly as visually interesting as most of the other games showcased. For example, Celico, built entirely in some Doom port from 2005 or something? Literally how? But also, KUR stars an Australian protagonist, one that sounds eerily like Gary's mum Cheryl in Final Space.
I kill things to solve problems and don't tell anyone as long as I get paid.
I can count on two hands how many games I know that feature any Australian characters, so I'm immediately interested. I know that's a shallow reason to want to play a game, but I'll take what I can get. Anyway, KUR takes place on a human colony on Mars, and you're tasked with doing something there. I'll be honest, I just kind of phased out whenever people started talking. Yeah, this game's not so crash hot with the story, with either super bland phoned in voice acting or, on the total opposite end of the spectrum, extremely over the top impressions of characters from popular culture.
Of course he is brilliant. One doesn't just happen upon a position like this. But brilliant and sane are often mutually exclusive. I suppose that I am a happy exception to that trend.
I've had it with this so-called Otis. If it's a delivery bot, I'm the damn Queen of England.
I I'm really tired of the lead engineer interfering with my work. He called my fish ugly and made them wear braces.
The game is trying really hard to be funny, I think. Yeah, that's what it says on its Steam page. A comedic take on the classic 90s shooter. Didn't laugh once, guys, I'm really sorry. The audio logs you find with those over-the-top caricatures come across as attempts at humor as written by a 13-year-old who just discovered jokes. And the main character herself has basically nothing to say, both figuratively and literally. Literally because she only speaks at designated points, i.e. when being contacted via radio or fighting a boss, instead of randomly during gameplay like characters such as Duke Nukem and Caleb would. And figuratively because when she does speak, there's nothing to even giggle at. She sounds less like the badass quip-spewing 90s action hero I think people will expect, and more like she's completely done with life. Like her husband left her child called her cringe, and she found out the guy she'd secretly subscribed to on OnlyFans will be out of a job in October.
Sheesh. With what's going on above, you're afraid of a few rodents? Whatever, Buttercup. Leave it to me.
This is something I hope gets a bit of reconsideration before its full launch because I feel like it's a very earnest attempt at humor, despite the fact that it falls flat. But thankfully the gameplay, the part that matters most, feels pretty good so far. It's a pretty standard boomer shooter affair. Circle strafe around enemies, find keycards, do some simple if somewhat janky platforming. If you've played any game similar to this, you'll be right at home. Immediate praise goes to the enemy design. Most of it is functional and it's easy to tell what an enemy is and what it does purely because they're color-coded in such bright standout shades of blue, red, etc. that you would have to be colorblind not to tell. Incidentally, colorblind options would go a long way here. These little cunts can get fucked though. They scurry around so quickly that sometimes when they lunge at you, they get stuck under you and start gnawing at your gooch, making them unnecessarily hard to deal with, more so considering how common they are and how many bullets they take even from the starter pistols. Cool design, they're little spider bots that wear the skulls of their victims, but yeah. Also, I find it funny that the player character hates spiders when she's an Australian. What a sook. Weapon lineup's pretty good. I didn't get to play with every weapon in the time I played, but they were all functional at worst and felt really satisfying at best. The akimbo pistols are alarmingly weak but get a shitload of ammo. The Hellfire is a standard assault rifle that feels and sounds pretty powerful. You get a spider leg with a question mark that acts as a melee weapon. There's a gun called the Big Boy Roy that fires off a stream of electricity. The shotgun has a pretty satisfying kick to it and it jibs the heck out of enemies, real nice like. Am I using that term correctly? Please don't get civvy on the horn. I'm like baby, I don't know what I'm saying. There's also a rocket launcher, a weapon that freezes enemies, and according to a review on Steam, there's also a gun that shrinks enemies and lets you step on them. I'll admit, I haven't seen that weapon as I didn't get as far as I would have liked. I kinda got stuck around the 7th or 8th level in this labyrinthian area where there were a billion paths that all looped back, and I couldn't find the keycard I needed anywhere, so that's where I decided to stop playing for the time being. Don't take that as me putting my thumbs down and making a really obnoxious sound though. I think KUR has a lot going for it and it'll find its audience in time, once it irons out some of those kinks. For example, the first level wasn't the best first impression. Most of it was pretty breezy, but at the end you're plopped into a big area with so many enemies that it's somewhat unlikely you'll have enough ammo to take them all out. I know I didn't, because all you have are the akimbo pistols and maybe the bouncing Betty if you manage to find it tucked away in a secret area. I died a couple of times before dropping the difficulty down a notch just for this area, because it was a little too much right out of the gates. Ammo scarcity is a bit of a problem to start with, and I found myself sticking to the pistols most of the time to conserve ammo, which, yeah, I get why, but also some weapons have really low max ammo, like the shotgun only gets 24 shots before it maxes out? Come on, man. Come on. And then there's the game's other big feature. Feet. Yeah, click the right mouse button and you'll kick whatever's in front of you, or you can hold it down to do a flying kick that propels you forward. On one hand, I wasn't a huge fan of the idea that this kick requires energy to use because that would discourage me from kicking anything and everything, but around the time I stopped playing, I had well over 1,000 energy. A kick uses 5 energy and a flying kick uses 10. And I was using it pretty often as well. There's a dash that's also tied to this energy meter, and I neglected that a bit because I often forgot it even existed, but otherwise, yeah, I really do like the kick move despite all this. It also factors into platforming. Kicking as you jump will propel you into the air, while you can also kick off walls to perform a wall jump. It takes a little bit of getting used to, and the kicking animation makes it a little hard to get the timing down at first, but I do applaud the use of the kick in more ways than simply introducing enemies and breakable objects to Madam Foot. KUR is in early access, so obviously it's not going to be in tip-top shape right away, so I can forgive some of the unrefined quirks of its design and the few bugs I encountered, like this hologram asking me if I'd like to do it a favour, then refusing to talk to me when I hit interact, or jumping on this photocopier and getting stuck, forcing me to reload an old save. Those are fine, I can deal with them, and I will deal with them because I very much so plan to jump back into the game at some point. Despite the story and attempts at comedy that are so boring and dry that it's like eating Milo or Nesquik straight out of the tin, some early gripes with not having enough ammo or energy, and some of the weaker visuals in the 90s shooter throwback scene, KUR still plays pretty well so far, and I think that's what matters most. The gameplay is fast, loose, crunchy, and satisfying. The weapon selection is great, and the levels I've seen so far have been fun to explore, let alone the fact that they're huge and there's 23 of them. KUR still has a way to go before its potential is fully realized and it can truly stand out in the genre though, but I believe really Racclog can do it if they put their minds to it. Hopefully they use the early access period well and manage to find their feet. Nah, get it? Cause you can do that. Okay, I'll stop.
Where is the forza, the bravado, the passion, eh?
Okay, so this is cheating a little. I have played Forza Motorsport 7 before, but while I finished the main leg of the career mode, I never finished everything because I sort of ditched it after it left a bit of a bad taste in my mouth. Forza 7 is not a particularly well-liked Forza game for a multitude of reasons, and I totally understand where people are coming from when they say Forza 4 is better, but after returning to it, I've sort of grown to love it. I've worked around its issues and instead started playing in a particular way that, to me at least, makes it more enjoyable. For those not in the know, Forza 7's career mode is a very simple affair. There's 6 series with a bunch of divisions in each, and you just need to beat some of them to finish the game, like 4 or 5 per series. Then when you do that, the rest of the events open up, and if you want to go for it, you can finish those too. There's 2 reasons why this setup sucks. Yeah, sure, it might just seem like your regular Gran Turismo-like affair, but no, it's a totally different beast. For one, every car in the game is only usable in a single championship, so if you buy a wait, Toyotas aren't even in this game, Lamau. Remember when Toyota was going around saying, oh, we don't want our cars in games that promote street racing, then remove them from Forza Horizon and Motorsport, then put the GR Supra in the latest Fast and Furious movie? Pick a side, Toyota, oh my god. Different example then. If you buy an R34, you can only use it in its designated division, which is Sport GT or some shit. Once you finish that division, that car is entirely useless to you now. And that's kind of fucked. It totally destroys any semblance of meaningful progression and car collection because you don't really get a chance to get attached to any of your cars like you would in, say, Gran Turismo. That yellow Lancer you buy at the start of the game will be the little legend that kicks off your career while also potentially holding its own right throughout the entire game due to being useful in multiple different events. But here, you pick a car, you race with it a few times in a row, and that's it, you move on. The other issue is homologation. Each division has a certain performance requirement you can't exceed, but must also meet to remain competitive against the rest of the pack. With few exceptions, this means you can't really buy a car and drive it stock, as the game will ask you to cram upgrades into it or it'll do it for you itself. In some cases, this will make cars way too powerful than they are stock, and in other cases, cars actually have to be made less powerful in the name of fairness. This Focus, for example, that was gifted to me during Pride Month, a valiant effort turned 10, but this paint job is kind of awful, cannot actually be used in the super hot hatch division it's intended to be used in, because it's a B class and that division homologates all cars down to C class. Part of the charm of previous Forza and Gran Turismo games was being given the choice of buying a new car or pouring upgrades into one you already own to keep it competitive as you moved up the ranks, and that just isn't possible here, which really sucks. So what I did was ceased expectations from a game that would not give me what I wanted, and instead embraced it for what it was, an excuse to drive as many cars as possible. And that's where Forza 7 really shines. Not including DLC, Forza 7 comes with 700 cars from a wide range of different vehicle types. There's lots of divisions that focus on daily drivers and affordable sports cars, there's a few that delve into modern supercars and track toys, and there's a pretty large amount of race cars as well, from prototypes to open wheel cars. Each and every division feels totally unique, which is an impressive feat considering there's 6 or 7 dozen of them. And because you get so much money and are rewarded with discounted or sometimes even free cars upon leveling up, I had a surplus of cars to choose from in almost every division, so instead what I ended up doing was, instead of sticking to one car, I changed my car after every race or two, sampling as many cars as humanly possible. suddenly it was playing like something closer to the old race driver games. It was less about forming a car collection, but quickly being flung into as many different cars and race types as possible. And when I played the game like that, suddenly it was way more enjoyable. This was helped in part due to one of Forza 7's best features, that of course being the ability to adjust race length. This approach wouldn't have worked if I did a 3-lap race in a McLaren P1 then swapped to the Pagani Huayra for the next 2-lap one. Thankfully, Forza 7 lets those who don't want 5-minute races bump up the length to 15 minutes or even 45 or longer. Every race is suddenly an endurance race if you so wish, and I do so wish. So yeah, you bet your ass I spent the best part of an hour driving around Mugello in a commie. Even if sometimes endurance races are a bit shit because you might need to pit but the AI straight up doesn't at times, oh yeah, oh gee, wow, that's fucking fair. Though I still prefer Forza 4 and Gran Turismo 4, Forza 7 and by extension Forza Horizon 3 and to a lesser extent Horizon 4 are some of my favorite games simply because they give me the option to change the length of events to my own liking. If a Forza Motorsport game had Forza Horizon's blueprint system, specifically Horizon 3's Blueprint Championships, where I could customize every aspect of it, the amount of races, weather conditions, laps, what cars are eligible, etc., I would pretty much be in Simcade racing heaven. Add in a track editor with which your created tracks can also be injected into these custom careers and oh my fucking god, I would never play anything else. But also that's likely a pipe dream and only something I and maybe a few other people would be interested in tinkering with in depth, but hey, whatever, a raccoon can dream. And all this is to say nothing of the game's other features. Over 700 cars, the vast majority of which feel different from each other. The largest and most diverse lineup of locations in the series' history, of which only Project Cars 2 could trumpet. Visuals that to this day still look incredible, especially at night or during wet conditions. And even the ability to tweak settings and even purchase new cars while loading into a race, which admittedly is not the smoothest of times on any of the Xbox One models, and on my Xbox Series S is rendered entirely pointless when the game loads in under 10 seconds, but hey, in 2017, that was some pretty cool shit. As it is, I think Forza 7 is still worth a play if you don't go in expecting a satisfying car collecting experience and tune into the idea of just driving around as many homologated cars as possible. Bump the race length up to long at the very least as well, extra long if you're a real champ, and just sit back and enjoy driving a bajillion cars. Whether you're just playing casual 5-minute races or doing mini endurance races, that's the beauty of Forza. It's totally up to you. Also, PSA, Forza 7 is being removed from the Xbox storefront on September 15th and is on sale at the time of writing, so if you want it dirt cheap, now is the time. Get it, you fucking cheapskates! I can never decide whether I like short or long games the most. On one hand, there's stuff like the aforementioned Forza 7, which I probably have over 100 hours on and I'm nowhere near close to finishing due to the fact that I'm purposefully prolonging it by adjusting the race length. On the other hand, we've got Titanfall 2. It's only got 8 missions, not including the tutorial, but those 8 missions are some of the most tightly designed missions in any FPS that I and the other 12 people who've played it have ever seen in an FPS. I'm cheating again a little bit, I've already played Titanfall 2 on Xbox One some time ago, but decided to re-experience it on PC after I picked it up on Steam for $7, which is basically its RRP at this point. But yeah, I've already bear witness to the incredible epic tale of, I had to Google this, his name is Jack Cooper. I genuinely thought it was Ryan Cooper, but no, that's the Need for Speed Pro Street guy. Both games from EA as well, damn. So the story is definitely not what you're here for. Outside of some endearingly oblivious dialogue from your Titan, BT.
Pilot, our paths will intersect just up ahead.
Missing me already?
I was not shooting at you. That would be a violation.
There's very little you'll take away from the game's narrative, and that will likely include any of the characters' names apart from Jack Cooper and BT. Again, I had to Google this. Cooper and BT have to help stop a big stinky corporation from using a super weapon that will destroy the planet Harmony if used. Cool. No one cares. Apparently the writers do, because the credits show all these characters off as if I remember half of them. The only thing I remember being that half of them are Kiwis, so I enjoy the idea that we're basically a 2-man army waging war against New Zealand, but really, no one remembers the story. we all remember the gameplay. You know, the high-octane parkour gunplay that Call of Duty had for a while and everyone hated because it felt shoehorned in because they basically just ripped it off from the first Titanfall anyway, and also couldn't provide the level design to back it up. No, here the game is specifically designed around it and actively encourages it. Sure, it's a cover shooter with regenerating health, but you're still pushed towards staying on your feet and using the environment rather than poking your cute little head out of cover and picking off enemies from afar. Double jumping through the air, running along walls, cloaking, sliding. Not only does all this make it harder for enemies to hit you, but it just feels good to do. Taking enemies out while running along walls is up there as being one of the most satisfying mechanics in any video game in my eyes, alongside stuff like takedowns in Burnout 3 or Witch Time in Bayonetta. And it really helps that the weapons themselves sound and feel so satisfying to use. I had clear favourites, the R97 and the Mastiff in particular, but there weren't any weapons I especially disliked using, which is impressive considering just how many there are. And that's to say nothing of piloting that giant exoskeleton that's following you around and filling your ears with his deep, sexy robotic voice either. You're less maneuverable while piloting BT, but you're 10 times more powerful, shooting rockets, swinging giant fuck-off swords, catching projectiles, laying down columns of fire. It's magnificent! There are 8 different loadouts which you can swap between at any time with a press of F1 after collecting them, and each one of them feels incredibly powerful. I find zipping about on foot more fun overall, but thankfully, the game balances things out by forcing you back out on foot often, making those times when you do get to pilot BT all the more cathartic. But what really brings everything together is the level design. Butter me in breadcrumbs and feed me to a snaggle beast. This is some good shit. The more tame missions are still filled with excellently designed arenas for fast, fluid firefights, but it's the more unique ones that will truly linger in my mind. For example, Effect and Cores is one of my favourite moments in gaming, period. I mentioned this briefly in my Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart review, a game that had a similar mechanic where you could switch between 2 dimensions by hitting crystals. But here, the ability to switch between the past and present is entirely in your hands. Literally. Your cloaking ability is temporarily replaced with a device that jumps you back and forth in time in an instant, which is used not only for some brilliant platforming sections, but has some insanely fun practical use in combat as well. You'll quickly figure out that you can leap to an alternate time period to gain the upper hand on enemies, but just when you've got that mechanic figured out, the game gets really cheeky. Oh shit, there's some dudes here. I guess I'll just jump forward in time and oh shit, now I'm suddenly involved in 2 fights at the same time. It is fucking wild, dude. That to me is absolutely the standout mission in the game, but there's some other really cool moments as well, both scripted and otherwise, like the one where you're going through an assembly line of a manufacturing plant and are fighting in constantly shifting terrain, for example. And in particular, I love the last mission, which equips you with a pistol so fun and overpowered that you only get to use it for a few minutes, and frankly, Respawn can kiss my ass for this. But yeah, there isn't a single dud mission here. Even the couple of missions that are just fights against a boss are still pretty cool fights. Every single mission has its own unique mechanic or setting that makes it stand out from the last, and it contributes to a campaign that is pretty much close to being perfect, I think, with the only letdown being the story is super generic and unmemorable. So just ignore it, like I did, and enjoy all the cool moment-to-moment gameplay, because I guarantee, no matter what, you are going to enjoy it. So long as you only play the single player side of it. Yeah, expectedly, Titanfall 2 has a multiplayer component. I mean, the first game was entirely multiplayer focused, so who would have guessed, am I right? But I can't comment on it. It's not something I was ever compelled to touch, mostly because I rarely play games online anyway, because I'm what you would call, you know, bad. But as of writing, I'm not sure if this is fixed at this point, both Titanfall and Titanfall 2 servers are currently suffering from constant DDoS attacks that are ramping up players' ping so high as to make matches unplayable, or even prevent players from logging in the first place. For that reason, I felt a little hesitant about including Titanfall 2 in this Racclog, because I feel that Respawn and EA should be way more upfront about these issues, especially considering the game is still being sold on digital storefronts with prominent focus on the game's multiplayer. you know, the part you can't access. But because I have no horse in that race and only played the single player, I can still confidently recommend it based on that alone, especially if you pick it up on sale, which, considering it's pretty much always on sale for like $5 US, you're getting one of the best first-person shooter campaigns for the price of a small cheeseburger meal from Macca's. Which would you prefer, 6 hours of nearly uninterrupted FPS perfection, or a burger you finish in 3 bites that comes with its own little slice of solidified snot? I don't know why I said that, I love pickles. The final game for this episode of Racclog is a relatively unknown platformer called Mail Mole. I'd been following along with the game's development for several months before the game's launch and was really intrigued by the idea of playing as a mole, and how that animal's unique characteristics would affect gameplay in innovative ways. Bit unfortunate that Mail Mole doesn't actually do much with that idea then, but that can be easily forgiven because it's a fun time regardless. For Talpa Games' first effort, I think they did a really solid job at creating a platformer with minimal inputs, but just enough depth to carry the game through its 7 worlds. There's basically only 3 inputs aside from movement. Smack A to jump, hold X to dash, and press the right trigger to do a little butt stomp in midair, though I ended up rebinding dash to the left trigger instead as it felt more natural. There's a little quirk you have to get accustomed to though. In other platformers, pressing A immediately makes your character leap into the air, but by holding it you can adjust how high you jump up to a point. With Multi here, however, tapping A makes him do a little hop, which is rarely good enough for clearing gaps. You have to hold A to charge up, then release to get maximum hang time. This definitely took a bit of getting used to for me, especially when using it in conjunction with the super dash move, where you tap the dash button as you land to make a sudden beeline forward. Numerous times I would land on a platform, then press dash so that I can start moving quicker, only to shoot straight off the edge. There are even a couple times where I accidentally trigger the super dash after respawning because multi respawns in the air.
Hop. Hop. Hop.
If you can get around these quirks, however, and honestly you very likely will, there's a fun little game waiting here for you. The closest comparison I can make is Super Mario 3D World, to the point where some of the obstacles here are very reminiscent of Mario's Wii U adventure, right down to the platforms that switch on and off when you jump. Each level is a linear affair with some carrots to collect, which you can spend on an extra hit point or costumes back in the main hub, as well as 3 turnips to find in various hidden areas. It's a very light challenge, especially the first few worlds, with a lot of levels initially not even having any hazards, making those 3 hit points at the top of the screen a little confusing to start with. The challenge does ramp up towards the end, especially on Magma Rock, but not to a frustrating degree. But though it's a really easy game overall, there was never a time where I threw my paws up in the air and said, "Wow, this is boring, I'd much rather be playing any of the numerous furry/hentai games that have been gifted to me instead." Nah man, as simple and laid back as this is, once I got used to the controls, I had a blast with Mail Mole. Each of its worlds only took around 20 minutes to complete, so it's a really neat little game to smash through on a cozy weekend. But for those who find themselves enamored with the game, there are medals to earn by beating each level in an allotted time, as well as races against CPUs, and even some free DLC to hook your claws into, adding an extra 8 new levels. There's a lot to love here. Really, the only place where I think Mail Mole truly falters is, again, the fact that as a mole, you don't do a lot of particularly mole-y things. Think about it, as Mario, a plumber, you go down pipes. As Scalar, a big lizard boy, you sling your long tongue around and climb walls. Spyro's a dragon, so he gets to breathe fire and glide through the air. The only thing that makes you feel like you're playing as a mole here is the fact that instead of waddling around on 2 feet, Multi burrows through the ground, but this is never actually used as a gameplay mechanic. One way being a mole could have been capitalized on is letting Multi burrow under objects, for example, as you can in Super Lucky's Tale. But honestly, it's not a huge issue. And I do wonder if that's the result of the game seeming like it's super low budget, from things like the voice acting, which sounds like the dev team gargling soft drink in front of a mic, to the occasionally questionable translation, including things such as steeping, or locked levels being labelled as unknown area, to the fact that the entire soundtrack is made up of royalty-free music from Kevin MacLeod's library. I had a hunch, because a lot of the tracks sound wildly different from one another, but I had a "yo, I know that song" moment when I heard the song that I'd used all the way back in my review of Super Mario Maker in 2015. This isn't a knock on the game, by the way, and if anything, I admire Talbot Games a great deal for their work here. Despite some initial control issues and other little quirks that feel distinctly low budget, Mail Mole is a very polished and enjoyable little game with a cute art style, plenty of content for its price, and options for people who both want to be challenged or have a chill time playing as an adorable little mole friend. And really, I think it's a great time to be a 3D platformer fan right now. Back when A Hat in Time and Yooka-Laylee launched, the genre was still looking a little bare, especially when there were a few other attempts like Skylar and Plux that were
keep rolling, 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 rolling. Say hello to my little friend.
Skylar Lynx. Age? Who cares? Swipe left. You maniacs. You blew it up. Ah, dang you. Gosh dang you all, you smell. Hey, don't...
Whoops, too late. We came in like a wrecking ball.
Yeah, we don't talk about Skylar and Plux, but now it feels like there's so much more choice. Blue Fire, Here Comes Nico, Lucky's Tale, A Hat in Time, Pumpkin Jack, and upcoming games like Billy Bust Up and Demon Turf are only part of what makes up the indie representation of the genre, while even high-profile developers are helping bring back the heyday of the genre with Astro's Playroom, Ratchet & Clank, Psychonauts 2, and Crash 4, even if it's published by them. It feels like no matter where you look, there's a quality 3D platformer waiting for you nowadays. And even though Mail Mole is comparatively simple and made by such a small team, it still stands out amongst them. Especially since you can dress Multi up as the penitent one with a monocle. Pack it up, fellas, we've reached the pinnacle of gaming! So that was Racclog numero uno. I'm not sure how often I'll be releasing new episodes in the series, but I think with the fact that I don't gotta put in as much effort with Racclog, that means I'll be able to pump out new episodes as often as I play new games. And therein lies the problem, because wow, starting new games is hard. Being a gamer these days sucks. I had so much trouble getting this video off the ground because actually sitting down and starting a new game is itself difficult enough, but choosing what I want to play in the first place? Bruh, between the 581 games I own on Steam, that many I have on PS5, the 191 I have on Xbox Series S, not including the several hundred games on Game Pass I have access to, and the few hundred games I could also be playing on any of my legacy consoles, how the fuck am I supposed to know where to start? And even when I do start, sometimes I pick up a game, play for a few hours, go, oh, this is better than sliced bread, and then drop the game entirely for a year or so before I pick the game up again, and drop it again. Why do I do this? I started Yakuza 0 3 different times, and the first time I started it was back around 2017. I only just finished it earlier this year. I played Fuel for the first time back around 2012, never finished it, and guess who's halfway through Fuel again now? No, seriously, I think I've made it further into Fuel than literally anyone ever has. When it comes to reviewing a game, I have no issue starting and finishing something, but I'm really bad at finishing games that I'm playing solely for leisure. And that's part of the reason why I thought Racclog would be such a good idea. Not only does it let me talk about games I don't think I could push out a whole video for, but it encourages me to sit down, try new games, and hopefully keep up with them and actually finish them. And while some may view the idea of monetizing my hobby a little unhealthy, I don't see it as such. Sometimes when I'm not playing games, working on videos, or going for a stroll around the bike track and listening to City of Evil and Ziltoid the Omniscient for the 78th time, I like to just sit down with my iPad or my laptop and write. I'll write whatever the heck I want. Before, I would just write out lists, like, ooh, this is my dream car list for a Simcade racing game, or, oh, this would be my dream set list for a Rock Band style game, which I think satisfied the autistic side of me that enjoys doing repetitive tasks. Lately, it's been writing ideas and even draft chapters for an idea I've been developing for a book or a series of books. But sometimes I want to write about video games, and this is the perfect outlet for that. Not only do I satiate my need to write, but I get to talk about as many games as possible, which satisfies my need to do so after the very slow few years I've had recently, where I could count the individual games I've covered on my hands and maybe toes if I were into that shit. So while I wouldn't recommend this approach to everyone in the game review scene, I think it works for me. And while I'm not sure I'll do this going forward, I think one way that may help me get through my backlog is if I document some of the games I own that I'm most interested in trying, or that I'm partway through and need a reminder to keep playing because I have the memory span of a goldfish. Where am I? I need an adult. Wildermyth grabbed my attention immediately, with its approach to storytelling that revolves around crafting a randomly generated but memorable and unique story around also randomly generated characters. And while I'm not a fan of turn-based strategy RPGs in particular, I'm really looking forward to giving this a whirl. I'm partway through Yakuza Kiwami, which I'm simultaneously enjoying a lot, but also feel like I would rather be playing Yakuza 0 again. But I'm really excited to try the rest of the series, so I'll be persevering regardless. Chris Tales just appeared on Xbox Game Pass and it looks absolutely gorgeous, and it has a little frog friend, so it's already a perfect game, but I'm interested to see how its time traveling mechanics play into its turn-based combat. After years of whining about how Dark Souls sucks, I actually just bought Dark Souls Remastered a week or so ago, and I'm gonna sit down and give it a fair shake instead of noping out of it half an hour in. And also, I would really like the opportunity to both gush about and poop all over DJ Max respect. After using it prominently in all 3 of the Q&As I've done, I think it's about time. Anyway, hope you enjoyed this brief look into my gaming backlog, and I'll see you all in the next Racclog where I say, sorry guys, I've actually just been playing more Ratchet & Clank, Rock Band and Forza again. Imagine being really bad at being a gamer. I'm so sad. Wow, okay, so I had the sense to script the outro this time. Lamau, go me. Anyway, thanks for watching this far. I realize this probably isn't as interesting as a normal video, but like I said, these are just little stopgaps to ensure that I don't upload every 7 months, and so that I'm always working on something, even if it's comparatively low effort. And also it's fun talking about indie titles that not many people have heard of. The format might shift around a little bit. I'm not sure I want to write 1,500 words for every game I talk about. It won't always be 5 games, it could be more, it could be less. Maybe at some point I'll even talk about something that isn't even a video game for a couple minutes, who knows? But yeah, we'll see how we go. Anyway, Patreon Q&A time. SoFox asks, Dear Remy, how can the universe be infinite and expanding at the same time? I feel like an asshole saying this, but I think we should ask Yo Mama. Aetheric Ruby asks, you have unlimited funds and the means to make any crossover a reality. What 2 franchises would you mash together? Joke answers, Kingdom Hearts and The Simpsons because the memes would be delicious, and RemyRaccoon and Raccoon because Sly is a hot piece of work, I tell you what. Actual answer, any rhythm game such as Theater Rhythm or DJ Max with Pokemon. Theater Rhythm Final Fantasy kicks ass, and I want to see Pokemon's music get the same treatment. Luigi Freak 3456 asks, favorite fighting game? If we're talking one-on-one fighters and not Smash Ultimate, the one I played the most was Tekken 6. I love the characters, I especially love the music. I even got the limited edition, which came with this sick hoodie, which unfortunately was lost in the back of a cupboard, and when I found it several years later, it was coated in mouse poop. Pear Basket asks, opinions on waffles? I've never had waffles, admittedly, and I have this weird stigma engraved into my brain that they taste like pancakes, which I have no idea if it's true or not, but if they do taste like pancakes, then I want nothing to do with them. Daniel Rotwind asks, snow? Yeah, I'd let him rail me. And finally, the Fox asks, fucking hell, this is good shit. Damn. Remy, did you eat my sandwich? It was sitting on the bench, it was free game. Anyway, fuck, that actually was a really good sandwich. If you want to get in on this, you can pledge to me over on Patreon and just ask me a question there, or head over to the Rack Shack Discord server and post questions in the Patreon questions channel. And speaking of Patreon, the following people will be spared on the day of the Raccoon Uprising. SoFox, K, Damien Maxted, Dalek Boy, Aetheric Ruby, Alice Whitaker Bartlett, Heat Hoot Skyet, Jackie Pendragon, Jayet, Johannes Anderson, Juzzy Become Android, Kurote the Kitsune, Leo Alex50, Native Light, Nathaniel Forrest, Pear Basket, Philip Elk, Sheepy, Squid Superstar, The Dervinator, and Travis Miranda. Not only will you be spared, but if you pledge to my Patreon no matter what tier, I appreciate the hell out of you. Anyway, follow me on Twitter to keep up to date with my shit and my shits. Join the Discord server and leave immediately. And send me fan art over on Twitter or Discord or at theremyraccoon@gmail.com. I got so much fucking fan art for my birthday, I'm gonna scream. But yeah, anyway, I'll catch you all next time when we talk about the Sidekick spin-off game on PSP that was actually good. Hint, it starts with D and ends in Axter. Peace out, y'all.